I need y'all to be excited when you get courage, y'all. I need you to be excited. I need you to know that you're talking about a wise woman. I need y'all to know that you're talking about a spiritual woman. I need y'all to know that you're talking about somebody that Chicago needs, and it is my distinct honor, my distinct privilege, and my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Amara Enyia.
This is such a beautiful sight. Yes, it is. This is such a beautiful sight. You know how I know we will win? It's because of the people in this room right here, right now. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Buenas noches. Bonsoir. Indibanye ndewonu. Thank you for coming on this evening. My name is Amara Enyia, organizer, activist, public servant, problem solver, daughter of immigrants, daughter of activists, and I'm running to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago. Gracias a todos por estar aquí. Me llamo Amara Enyia, servidora, defensora, abogada, hija de inmigrantes, hija de activistas, y quiero ser el próximo alcaldesa de Chicago. Sí se puede. Now, let's give a big applause for all of our volunteers, my amazing team. Man. You guys are so off the chain. It takes a unique kind of person to join a movement like this. And so I want to give kudos to my team, to all of you for coming out here this evening. I also want to thank the speakers and the performers that use the spirit of their art to raise the spirit in this room. Daring to step out in order to do what is right is nothing new for my family. From my great-grandmother challenging oppression by the British in continental Africa in the early 1900s, to my parents who, always advocates for human rights, both fought in and endured a brutal civil war in Nigeria. We are now present here in Chicago. My parents, who are the foundation upon which I am who I am. My 5 phenomenal siblings, each uniquely awesome in their own right. They keep me constantly inspired as well as grounded. The legacy continues today in present-day Chicago, where the 8 of us settled here, shuttling between the south suburbs and the north side, Rogers Park, Edgewater, Uptown, until I found my home on the west side of Chicago. Just like all those who came before us, we live in troubled times. Across the country and across the world, people are struggling. Uncertainty clouds the future just as much as it does the present. Humanity confronts social inequality, unheard of since the Gilded Age. Unemployment numbers are deceptive. They don't count all of the underemployed or the people who simply stopped looking for work. Incomes for the average household have been stagnant since the Reagan era. 40% of us don't even have $400 on hand in case of emergencies. Debt of all kinds, student debt, credit card debt, municipal debt. They all constrain individuals, the economy, and government. As the well-being of billionaires continues to improve, the burdens of poverty flood the land. These billionaires befoul the body politic with dark money. They use their money to invest in politicians. You all know who I'm talking about. These politicians who expand their wealth at the expense of human lives, children's health, and the well-being of our planet. In the face of all of this, how can we get ahead as individuals, as families, and as a city? Let me tell you what you already know. If things stay on the same course, we will never get ahead. We won't simply receive fairness. It won't just fall from the sky. Will the cronies and their politicians give us a helping hand in our fight for justice? The answer is no. No one will give you fairness. You can ask politely if you want, but the people most responsible for diminishing our schools, weakening democracy, and gutting our economy will not hand out fairness or wake up to the need for fairness and openness in government. So how did we get here? The rotten circumstances we struggle against didn't arise by accident. Rather, we are living with the outcome of a definite set of policies, a set of policies that stem from the imagination of those who hold a different set of values about what it means to serve the public, those who are only interested in serving themselves. It's the same story everywhere, and in Chicago it goes something like this. Privatize public assets, privatize services, eliminate services, regressive taxation, economic injustice, police state strategies, and public corruption. Lots of it. Here in Chicago, we are some of the hardest working people on the planet, and yet we still fight to keep neighborhood schools in place. We work hard only to pay higher and more abusive taxes, fees, and fines as services diminish and infrastructure crumbles around us. Is it any wonder that this administration and all of its agencies operate with virtually zero credibility? How can they expect to be credible when nearly $1 billion of our tax money is going to settle police abuse claims? How can they expect to have any credibility when they are so resistant to even the mildest reforms? How can our government expect to be credible when the only solution to our fiscal crisis is to borrow more money, saddling our children with the debt of poor decisions made today? How can our education system be credible with a pattern of destabilization, disinvestment, and dysfunction that have resulted in filthy schools, rampant sexual abuse, and starkly unfair school systems where some schools have all while others have none, forcing families to flee to the suburbs for better options? We deserve far better, and we will get it because we are willing to organize and fight for it. Despite what the professional pundits and the political class would have you to believe, the basic issues are largely the same, whether it's teachers in Chicago Lawn, business people in Auburn Gresham, students in Edgewater, or seniors in Austin and Jefferson Park. So when I'm asked why I want to be mayor, and when people ask you why you are a part of this campaign, we can give them this simple answer. Because we believe that city government must work in the interests of the people of Chicago. Because we believe in people power. It's important to understand the context of these harmful policies that I described earlier. They stem from a philosophy. It's called a neoliberal philosophy. What that looks like, it looks like half-baked big projects while potholes abound in the neighborhoods. It looks like plans to put the city billions of dollars further into debt on terms that only a banker could love. To set good financial terms with municipalities, they have to ensure that banks receive regular payments, transferring income and wealth from taxpayers through the government into banks and bondholder accounts. Any threat to those payments, the rating goes down, interest goes up, and more tax dollars go to the banks. That is what I call a rigged system. Of course, we have an answer, a public bank. Imagine a bank whose allegiance is not to profit, but to the public. A Bank of Chicago will allow us to finance our own projects without paying a fortune in tax dollars to private banks in contrived fees and service payments. It could actually generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and create hundreds of millions of dollars in savings. Moreover, we believe in an inclusive economy, one that can reverse decades of stagnant incomes and the continued decline of far too many communities, an economy that actually builds generational wealth from the ground up and rebuilds the fabric of communities. And that is why I propose making Chicago the #1 city in the country in the advancement of cooperative economic models. These models are worker-owned cooperatives, community land trusts, housing cooperatives, enterprises that are democratically owned and operated, that build community ownership and wealth for a Chicago that is inclusive, thriving, and strong. This is the vision for the future. I find it interesting, the silence of this administration on the fact that Chicago is the #1 city for 3 years in a row for population loss. There has been absolutely no effort to bring those people back. While some may believe that this is not their problem, that perhaps the ones leaving or pushed out are the ones we didn't want anyway, I say this: there is both a moral and a fiscal imperative to restore our population. Morally, the ravages of displacement caused by a lack of affordable housing must be stopped in its tracks, lest generations of Chicagoans find themselves forced out of their neighborhoods. Morally, we must end the knee-jerk, short-sighted responses to violence allowed to proliferate in our communities by actually committing to addressing the root causes of violence: access to mental and behavioral health services, elimination of public health hazards like lead in our water and manganese in our soil, and economic investment. Morally, if we value all of our communities as our city claims, then we will not turn a blind eye to an entire community lost, 250,000 Black residents lost in 15 years. The silence of this administration bespeaks the moral bankruptcy of its policies. For those who are perhaps unmoved by the moral imperative, there is a fiscal imperative. Simply put, the size of our population determines the size of our revenue. Fewer residents means fewer tax dollars. In particular, property tax dollars, which is the city's primary source of revenue. But that's not all. As a systems thinker, I think about the exponential effects of that population loss. Think about our small business sector, for example. What I know is this: a shrinking population means fewer patrons of our small businesses. Vacant homes mean no foot traffic to support local businesses, which means fewer tax dollars from the business community. It also means fewer people employed, thus more people struggling to make ends meet, even as they face an onslaught of fines, fees, and increased taxes from the city that have driven many to turn to bankruptcy as their only option. In short, a shrinking population affects all of us, from the Magnificent Mile downtown to the Blacknificent Mile on the south side, 79th Street. Yeah, y'all like that, right? Addressing the crux of our city's financial problems starts with acknowledging the fact that we need our people to stay right here in Chicago. The question for us is, what reason have we given them to stay? We will give them access to affordable housing across the city where people have the option to stay in their neighborhoods, even as their neighborhoods change. We will give them an opportunity to champion the use of community benefits agreements for development projects so that communities have a say in how their neighborhoods evolve. We will implement structural fixes to our city's finances, like the public bank, expanding our economy with cooperatives and other models that build individual, family, and generational wealth. We will clamp down on corruption by strengthening a culture of transparency and openness in government. We will ensure that Chicago Public Schools ends the practice of destabilization, inequity, and using school boundaries to perpetuate segregation across the district. Where we have a school system where our children don't have to be warriors in a fight amongst adults, where our young warriors like Jaquil and Will, who are somewhere in the audience tonight, high schoolers, don't have to spend their last years of high school in Inglewood fighting to keep their school open. We will create a city where a level 1+ school, National Teachers Academy, is not closed solely to serve the interests of wealthier, politically connected families with access to the mayor. We will create safer communities by dedicating a percentage of the police department budget to creating and institutionalizing block clubs as part and parcel of our community. Where instead of spending $95 million on a police training academy, we actually invest a larger percent of our budget in the things that build people up, not just the methods of locking people up. We will create a new culture in Chicago, one that is not based on fear, where people fear retribution if they dare to speak out. We will build a city that prioritizes civic engagement, not one that cynically relies on low voter turnout to preserve incumbents. Our campaign is a campaign committed to engaging the disengaged and connecting with those whom others overlook because they don't fall conveniently within the most likely to vote category. For us, a win is not just one person getting a seat on the 5th floor of City Hall. A win is restoring respect and legitimacy in our public institutions, increasing civic engagement, and creating an environment where every single person is able to realize their fullest potential. The truth of the matter is that we have to fight for the future that we want. I'm reminded of a story that was told to me by an older, wise mentor of mine. It was the story of Caesar and the Rubicon. In 49 BC, on the banks of the Rubicon, which is a small stream in Italy, Julius Caesar faced a critical choice. According to the law of the Roman Republic, any provincial governor leading troops across the borders back into Italy would be declared a public enemy. It was quite simply an act of war. In short, if Caesar chose to cross the Rubicon, there would be no turning back. It was an agonizing choice, the choice of certain death or an uncertain future. Chicago, we have reached a crossroads. We must make a choice. The die has been cast. It was cast when our current mayor decided that ignoring entire communities was acceptable. It was cast when 16 shots into the body of Laquan McDonald was a mere political inconvenience to be covered up by this mayor and his administration. It was cast when this mayor continued policies that cannibalize our neighborhood schools, leaving families with fewer quality school options. The die has been cast. I say to you all, Chicago, we have fought too long and too hard to turn back. For me, for us, there can be no retreat and no surrender. We must cross the Rubicon. We shun death for an opportunity at a better life on the other side. But we must not be afraid. Fear is the biggest tool used by those seeking to maintain the status quo. Fear is a tool to distract. Fear is a tool to dissuade. Fear is a tool to destabilize and paralyze us, to keep us from recognizing the power that we have to create a future that reflects our values, values of justice, values of equity, values of fairness, values of our shared humanity. Our love for our great city must surpass our fear of the future. I believe there's a passage in the Bible that says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear." We fight for this city because we love this city. Every neighborhood, every enclave, every resident, from the guys in the boardroom to the guys on my block. So therefore, we move boldly into our future, but we do not go alone. We advance carrying the banner of the ancestors that paved the way before us. A banner that spans across time and space. A banner of justice in a fight for the ages. It is a banner that was held by our beloved Mayor Harold Washington. A banner that was carried by Jane Addams at Hull House. It was carried by Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. It was carried by Fred Hampton. It was carried by the great trailblazer Sojourner Truth. It was carried by Malcolm X. It was carried by Harriet Tubman. It was carried by this city's founder, Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable. It is a global banner in a global fight for the greater good and for the sake of humanity. In this fight, there is no retreat and no surrender. There is no retreat and no surrender. Only a commitment to actualizing our highest ideals. Only a commitment to integrity, a commitment to unity, a commitment to justice, a commitment to equity, and a commitment to love. It's time for new ideas. It's time for a new and different kind of leadership. I think we've had enough. It's time for problem solvers and not politicians. It's time for folks who are not afraid of challenging the status quo. It's time for people who love this city so much that they are willing to overturn an administration that has failed us and previous administrations that have failed us for decades. It's time for a new vision for Chicago. It is up to us to make sure that 5 years, 15 years, 150 years from now, Chicago remains a proper city for individuals, for families, and for our communities. A place fit for all of our children, built in the image and honor of the best of our ancestors. I cannot do this without you. To paraphrase the African proverb, the only way we go far is if we go together. Another proverb says, in times of crisis, the wise build bridges and the foolish build barriers. We must build bridges across neighborhoods, bridges across ethnicities, bridges across socioeconomic groups, bridges across ages. We must build bridges, intergenerational bridges, bridges across race, bridges across class, bridges across your orientation and status in this country. We must build strong bridges because the times that we are in demand it. Therefore, every handshake counts. Every conversation counts. Every flyer counts. Every precinct counts. Every penny counts. Every penny really does count. And every vote counts. That is our strategy to bring a new day forward. Powered by people, we have a unique opportunity. It may be our last chance. I hope you will join me in this fight because we're in this together. All people, all voices, one city. 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 Thank you.
Amara, everybody.
Wow.